Greetings, Mark Garang here, publisher of The Sun, and today I'm with reporter Damon Steer and Rep David Paige. David, how are you?
Doing great. Thank you for having me today.
Good to see you. Damon, how are you?
I'm fine.
Yeah, you had a late night last night?
It wasn't that bad.
But you were at the selectmen's meeting and all hell broke loose?
Something like that, yes.
Okay, so we're going to read about it tomorrow?
We will.
Okay, good. All right, let's get to the matters at hand. So, Damon?
David Paige represents the town of Conway, and he's in his first term. And I think what voters and constituents really care about are taxes and housing. And David has co-sponsored a bill for a homestead exemption, which would basically give homeowners using their primary residence a tax break if it passes and the town adopts it. And I don't know if you could just quickly summarize it.
Sure. Yeah. So it's local option legislation, as you note. The town would have to adopt it. Every town gets to make its own decision as to whether it's the right choice for them. What it would do is it would exempt a portion of the assessed value of residential real estate that's used as a primary residence, right? The way the bill is currently structured, the municipality has flexibility up to a ceiling on what that dollar amount that's exempted is. That's currently in the bill as introduced, set at 35%. That may shift as we go through the process of the next few weeks and talking through potential amendments. But what this would do is it would allow us to make our property tax system a little bit more progressive, frankly. The benefit, the most benefit, flows to folks who are in lower valued properties.
Why
right?
is that?
So when you reduce when you exempt those taxes off of those primary residences, to keep it revenue neutral, what's going to happen is your mill rate is going to go up, right? So as you go up sort of the property value scale for your primary residences, you're going to see less and less of that tax advantage, if that makes sense.
Sure.
And as we know from what just happened here in Conway with the reval, your mill rate and your tax bill are two very different things, right? You know, people don't really care what the mill rate is, they care the tax rate, what their bill looks like, and
Okay,
that their bill went down.
so this is going to be, if this gets through, and I was talking to a rep the other night, and she didn't, or a former rep, and she didn't even think this may not even get out of the House.
It's possible.
And why wouldn't it get out? Like, so one thing, if this is it has to be done on a state level. It has to pass the legislature, the House has to pass the Senate, then it has to be signed by the governor, and then it's going to be up to each individual local municipality to set the rate. I missed that part. To set the exemption.
So the exemption amount will be a flat dollar amount, but it has to be below a certain ceiling. And that ceiling is based on a percentage of your median single-family home value. The reason we're doing it that way, as a percentage, up to a percentage, is that over time, what we know is that property values are going to rise, and we can't count on the legislator going back to increase that cap. So by making it a percentage, we allow it to, through time, that ceiling to increase.
Okay, but the local municipality can change that. Change that? Say that.
Correct.
I guess I'm a little foggy here on this.
Yep.
So, an example. So you have so one is that up to the local municipality? Or is this going to be a percentage that's set by this bill or the state?
So let's say, so the cap is a percentage of your local median single family home value. Up to that cap, the local municipality has the flexibility to set the dollar amount of the exemption, but they can't exceed that cap.
And the cap is?
35%.
And that's 35%
as introduced.
Of your, that would be, that's the most, and the highest exemption would be 35% of your total value of your house.
No.
See, this is why.
Yes.
This is why we.
Yeah. It is complicated. It's complicated. So it's going to be the same for every single person using their home as a primary residence. The amount exempted will be the same. So the selectmen will put an article on the warrant that says we're going to exempt $80,000 of the assessed value of your home. Okay. They have the authority to set that dollar amount. Okay. It just can't exceed that 35% of the median single-family home
Okay,
value.
so that we'll save that little weed part for the mathematicians.
Yeah.
So if you have a $200,000 home, what do you think? What do you recommend? What do you think is fair on the actual dollar amount?
So we're having a lot of discussions right now in a working group that's trying to get this passed. As you say, it's going to be hard.
And why is it hard? Why wouldn't every town want to do this?
I think in general it's a pretty popular idea, frankly, and I'm not sure exactly where all the resistance comes from. I think there is understandable resistance from some folks because it's more work. Right? I mean, it's going to administer this will take staff. It may be that, we need another staff person in our assessor's office, right? So there is some resistance there that I understand. I also come back to its local option, right? So the people of Conway decide, do we want this? Do we want this tax relief benefit? And are we willing to assume these pretty minor costs for a pretty large benefit, in my opinion. So each town then decides whether those trade-offs
Right, so just one more thing, Damon. So obviously for towns, the reason why you're interested in it, because you represent Conway, and the idea is to shift the burden to second homeowners.
Correct.
So if you're in Lee or someplace else that doesn't have a lot of second homes, you're not going to be as interested in it, but those municipalities would have the choice to do nothing, right?
That's correct.
All right, so there shouldn't be, I mean, it seems like no harm, no foul for those people.
Yep.
We benefit, the people I'm sure like Portsmouth and other sort of second home areas advocating this, right?
That's my take. The other piece, and something I heard from some Republicans in committee, was the concern about it also affecting your your commercial real estate, right? So I think again, local option. What do we as an individual community think is fair and want, right? And as we just saw, we're seeing a lot of big cuts in people's tax bills from some pretty big out-of-state corporations, right? And then we're seeing 75% increase on, the tax bill for a mobile homeowner. So is there one right answer? No, but but what I feel personally is we as a community should have the power to make that decision about what is fair.
Now, I realize this would be I'm sorry, Damon, one more thing. I realize that this is going to be up to the selectmen, not you, if this passes.
Right.
But do you have a sense of, because I think Maine, you can do like a 5% exemption, which isn't a whole lot, really.
Yep.
100,000, 5,000, maybe 20,000. So what do you think would be meaningful? It seems like you have to get into the $50,000, $80,000 range to have it really mean anything.
I think that's a conversation we need to have as a town if and when this passes. There's a lot of factors at play. I know, and I don't know if you want to talk about it now, Damon, but I know Damon mentioned a concern about what this might mean for rent, for people who are in apartment buildings paying rent. So I think one of the conversations we're having in our working group now is about creating what we're calling a glide path, right? So I think it would be prudent to start small, and I know that that's not necessarily what you want to hear if you're really suffering with a big tax bill this year. But I think there is some wisdom in starting small and hopefully graduating up to that 35% over time. I think how we build that into the bill, I'm not 100% sure yet. We're having those conversations now. But I could see us, for example, having a phased in exemption where maybe we started at 10% so that we can pause, we can assess, we can make sure that we're not seeing rents skyrocket. So that kind of easy as you go approach will make sure that we don't have unintended consequences.
But you said percentage, but I thought this was a fixed dollar amount.
So when I say percent, I'm talking about that ceiling cap, right? So I think what I'm hearing from some people is the potential risk is a town says out the gate, boom, 35%. We're going all the way up to the max right out the gate. And then do we see it, since this is new, do we then see these unintended consequences happen? I would love to deliver all that tax relief up front, but I hear the other side of that and see the wisdom in saying, okay, like maybe that's our destination, but maybe we need to do it in phases and make sure we take our time.
But 35% affects proportionally the same as a mobile home as $1 million home, right? But if you do a fixed number, you give everybody $80,000 relief, that's $80,000 off a $120,000 mobile home. Obviously, the tax bill goes down 2/3.
Right.
You take $80,000 off $1 million, and that's 8% or whatever.
Right, and this is what makes it a progressive relief, right? And if you're like me and you don't think we should have an income tax in New Hampshire, this is kind of the one way that we have to make our tax system, which is so reliant on property taxes, more fair, more progressive, and not be balancing our town budgets on the backs of our low-income residents, the people least able to pay. So I see this as just plain fair. That's how I look at it.
Okay.
So I gotta ask you about how it would affect rental properties. If I was a rental property owner and I lived in Dubai, obviously that's not my primary residence, and I've got my renters and tax burden is now shifted to me. This is assuming your bill passes and Conway adopts it. Then I get a massive tax bill. I'm going to say, well, I'm increasing the rent to cover my expense. So is that how it works, or is there a way around that? Or how do you make it fair to renters?
I think it's an important question. And I think that's the question that's pointing us toward a more graduated approach. Maybe not going all the way at once so that can be monitored. From what I have read, it's not necessarily a one-to-one. It's not necessarily the tax rate goes up and all that cost is passed on to the renters immediately. It's also complex because there's a lot of factors beyond just property taxes that affect our prevailing rental rates, right? So the way I see it is we have two different populations here who need to be looked out for, essentially, that we need to look out for their interests, right? We have somebody who is, living in a home, their tax bill just went up 75% or something wild like that, and they're wondering if this is a community where they can continue to stay and live, right? And we need to find a way to say, yes, that this is your home, you belong here, we care about you. We also have over here folks who are struggling, to meet rent, who are wondering if they'll ever be able to save enough for a down payment on a home. And we have to make sure, as we are serving these people, that we're not disservicing these people over here. So what I would like to see us do is to figure out how to ensure that we monitor, right? That we take it slow, but that we're not leaving those folks behind.
Wouldn't it just be a simple add to the bill to say, let's say you have a 4-unit apartment complex and they're all, 1 year plus leases, like anything like that is exempt from, or is included to
or don't do multi-unit.
I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's not as easy as a word. It would be a big overhaul. So it's something we can talk about. But there would be a lot of complexity in getting that done. I think the other thing I'd stress is the bigger issue here when we're talking about rents is just the availability of housing, right? Like at the end of the day, it's a supply issue. So we have to be solving for both problems at once, right? We have to walk and chew gum at the same time. So, my take is, how do we provide property tax relief for folks who really need it, and how do we get more affordable housing built, right? So I think we have to try to solve for both problems at once.
And another thing that I heard, and this is anecdotal from a prominent person in the community, he was saying that there's so much new building and property value coming online, and that would be captured sort of next year, and that might alleviate the need for the homestead bill. Have you heard anything about just the property taxes maybe spread out more? I think Market Basket was not up and running maybe it was, but some of the
we got hotels coming,
coming, and all that stuff will capture enough. We'll bring in enough revenue where that we might not need this. Have you heard anything along those lines?
It makes sense to me. I mean, when we add more value to property that we tax, that only stands to reason. Yeah.
But it never, that's always a little bit of a false God, so to speak, because you never can add that much to make a difference. I mean, you had $10 million worth of stuff. That's $1 million worth of revenue. Is that how it works? Is that the right percentage? $10 per mill rate?
Yeah.
Yeah. Is it that?
Well,
Yeah.
well,
Yeah. Or
10 million.
100,000.
It would be, if you had 10 million, then it would be $1 million, right? For the 10th.
Yeah. Okay. So anyway, it takes a lot. It just takes a lot to build up, given what we're spending. But you're also saying with all the new housing coming online, it always does seem that way, David. That boy, just when things are going one way, things change. You know, you got a planning board. You know, when it's in a development cycle now, you get a very conservative planning board that wants to put the cap on development with moratoriums. And then when in a recession, you get the pro-developers on the planning board, and boom.
Yep.
So is your sense, and I know you're not a realtor, but you're involved with housing and all that, is that where are we in this market that way? I mean, we do have a lot of homes coming online. I mean, there's Vestas coming online. We got the Settlers Green project in back of the TJ Maxx going to be built. We got the Continuum up here by Eagles Way.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of homes and condos is being built.
Yeah, I think Conway's doing a lot of things right in that regard, I have to say. It's never going to be enough. The demand is so large. I mean, we see, and it's not just Conway, it's all over the state. So, you know, we just have to keep doing everything we can. It
is on a treadmill. And the other side of that is the more people you have, the more services, and then it just, but anyway, that's another story.
Yep.
Yeah, so.
The Homenibus bill, you had some clever name for it. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. I'd be happy. I can talk a little bit about housing. So,
and the caucus that we talked about.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So I'm part of the Housing Caucus, which is a bipartisan, bicameral group of legislators.
It's bicameral, you mean that also includes senators?
Correct. Okay. Yep. And it's co-chaired by Senator Perkins Quokka, who was up here this last weekend and met Tom Eastman, and Joe Alexander, who's a Republican in the House. And, you know, this caucus gets together to try to find common ground so that we can actually get some things done, right, and try to move the ball forward. And what's amazing is we've got about, I think it's 60 pieces of housing legislation this year. So there's a lot popping. And there's a few bills that I think are really promising and that are sort of a focus for many of us in the caucus, both Republican-sponsored bills and Democrat-sponsored bills. There's the bill you referenced, which is called Homenibus. Homenibus, it's an omnibus bill, but it's got some interesting provisions in it. It's probably going to be less impactful for Conway than some other areas of the state. It addresses things like alternative parking solutions, incenting.
What's an alternative parking solution?
Like, for example, using a ride company or some other way of getting or public transit, some other way of getting people around that kind of provides a different way than sort of every unit having a certain amount of parking. It covers some other ground. It's got some incentives for the conversion of office space into housing. It deals with inclusionary zoning and requiring a certain percentage of units to be affordable. So there's some interesting elements to that. Another bill, which I think is extremely important, comes from Senator Innes, who's a Republican who ran for governor. I don't know if you remember him.
Oh, yeah.
He's got what I think is a really important bill, which takes it doubles the amount of the real estate transfer tax revenue that goes into the Affordable Housing Fund. So it doesn't increase the tax, it just reallocates a larger portion of that toward affordable housing. I think that would be extremely beneficial if it passes. It's definitely a priority. And then we have a bill, which, let me finish the whole the whole thing before you freak out about it. So there's a bill which I plan to support that comes from a Dem rep down in Newmarket named Ellen Reed, and it would allow folks to have a second ADU by right. So currently you can have one ADU by right.
ADU?
Accessory dwelling unit. And it would allow that second accessory dwelling unit to be detached. So currently it has to be attached. You can have now the second one that would be detached.
Put it in your backyard.
Right. Here's the important part, because people immediately in Conway, like I did when I first heard about this bill, said, oh, that's just going to turn into another short-term rental, right? So the bill also very importantly allows the municipality to say that it has to be deed restricted as workforce housing. So the municipality can make that choice to say, yes, you can by right have that second unit, but it has to be a workforce housing unit.
I mean, just mechanically, doesn't it? I mean, one thing to you build a mother-in-law addition to your house, you're on the same septic, but if you're out in the garage, I mean, if you're out in the backyard, you have to put a whole septic system in.
Sure.
Whatever. Okay. And by the way, I was just doing yeah, go ahead.
I see it as having a lot of potential. It's, I think it will be helpful for getting more workforce housing. It'll also be helpful, I think, for folks who want to buy a home for the first time, for whom suddenly they say, oh, I can see how I can make this work financially, right? I can make this pencil because, I can be renting this unit, and that will make me able to make my mortgage. So I see it as having a lot of potential benefits.
And it can bring outhouses back.
Yeah.
My math was off a decimal. If it's $10 million in value, it's not $1 million in tax revenue, it's $100,000.
Okay.
So that's not, you need a lot of tens of millions of dollars
of
increased value. So anyway, I just wanted to clear up that. What about the tax on like a surcharge on hotel stays and that stuff? What's that called?
It's a local occupancy fee.
Is that being considered?
Or they call it an assessment, which I think is confusing.
Yeah. So I primed the homestead exemption bill, and that bill is Tom's, but we're both co-sponsors on each other, as is Steve. Steve Woodcock is co-sponsoring both bills as well. I'm in support of that bill. I think it should. I would like for it to pass.
That probably has no chance, that one.
It actually, I was surprised at the warmth with which it was received in Ways and Means. And I think I got to credit everyone who came out from Conway. I think it made a really big difference for people to hear directly from local folks about what it means to them. And for both bills, we had a good showing of Conway folks, both leaders and just sort of everyday folks. And I think it's really important to give people the will to act. Right, sort of pulling at people's heartstrings is more effective, right? Because they want to then find a solution. It may not come out looking exactly how it was introduced, but they are seeing the problem. So I was actually pleasantly surprised by.
And what would that bill do? What would it do?
So that bill would enable the municipality to charge a nightly fee, a local assessment, over and above the rooms and meals tax that the state collects. I believe we're talking about up to $2 per night, and that would go straight to the municipality to offset public safety costs specifically. I think that it's a wise move. I think it's important that people understand that rooms and meals tax money goes to the state to balance the state budget. Right? So we're here bearing the costs of that tourism, but we're not seeing that direct benefit, right? So that money's being collected, it's going to Concord, and it helps a lot to balance our state budget. It's very important revenue to the state to make it all work. But we need to be able to offset the direct costs of hosting those folks that we see here in town.
Yeah, we got police, we got all the services.
Right.
And the $2 isn't, and I think whoever said, I mean, if you're staying up here and spending a ton of money, an extra $2 a night on $140.
Right, people won't even notice.
They won't notice it. So who's against it? Like, we're for it because we have a lot of hotels.
Sure. Well, sort of I can't think of the name of the association, but the hotel association, restaurant, and I can't think of the name of the association, did speak against the bill. They have spoken against similar bills in the past. I think my sense from talking to folks is that we have some local lodging owners who are supportive of the bill because they say, just like you say, people won't even notice the $2 and we need it in town. And we have others who oppose it. So I think it's, it's primarily opposition from the industry at large, and then from individuals in the industry. And I understand. I just don't think that the folks who are staying here will really care, frankly.
No, but the hotel, I mean, if there's, I'm sure one of the strongest lobbyists in the state are the hotel and the restaurant crowd.
Sure.
So that's a tough one. So we only got a couple minutes left. Go ahead.
I was just going to ask quickly about the timeline. How long will these bills be in committee, and when do people have to start worrying about the Senate? And how does the timeline work?
So crossover is in March. So every bill in the House needs to be, if we're talking specifically about the homestead exemption and the assessment, the occupancy assessment bills, those are both House bills that would, if passed, cross over to the Senate by March. So we're on a pretty swift timeline here. We should probably know within the next few weeks what the disposition of the House is on those two bills.
And how long will it be in committee, you think?
Remains to be seen. We have, on the homestead exemption bill, we have a working group that's getting together to work through a potential amendment. Tom Holmes has actually very graciously agreed to be on that group, as well as another assessor from the southern part of the state, some other legislators. So my hope is that we'll get a couple weeks on that to get some buy-in, make sure that we talk with Republicans on committee as well, see if we can get it to a place where they're comfortable with it. So I'd say probably, the next 3-4 weeks is sort of a hot and heavy time on both bills.
What do you think of?
And then just ultimately, it would go to the governor around June, I think.
Yeah, but we've got a long road.
Long way, yeah.
You got any signals from the Senate yet on these?
I only, I've reached out to Jeb to ask for his input on the homestead exemption piece, and I hope to meet with him on that whenever he's available. There's probably no person more in demand than Jeb right now. So I hope to get in front of him to chat about that. I know that he has said in the past that he
We're talking Jeb Bradley.
Yes, is open to some variation on a homestead exemption. So I would love to chat with him about what he would need for that to work for him. I know he sounded less enthusiastic about the occupancy assessment piece. I'll say something that I'm really proud of in relation to the homestead exemption bill is that historically this has been something that the Municipal Association has actively opposed. And we now have them to a point where they are neutral, and I am hoping we can get them to support through this amendment process. And I think that will make a big difference. I don't know that we're going to get it passed this year. We're going to try really hard. But even if we don't get it passed, we've made a lot of progress toward a bill that has more buy-in. So if we fail this year, we're going to come back again, and we're going to keep working with stakeholders to try to get more buy-in.
I would think that on the housing issues and this is your first term, so where I'm going with this is, I would think on housing issues, Republicans and Democrats are probably on the same path. I mean, everybody wants to improve housing, I would think.
Yep. But it's amazing how much detail there is there, right? And how bogged down in detail you can get and disagree.
I can appreciate that, but I'm sure the Republicans, from an economic point of view, just want more building, ease up on zoning laws and all that kind of stuff. And the Democrats are interested in finding people's homes. What's your impression so far as a first timer? Is it partisan? Is the whole House as partisan as you think, or less partisan, or where do you fall? What do you think? What's your experience so far? Are you in the succession movement here?
So I don't.
I don't think so.
It has not been a super partisan experience for me so far. I think some of that is personality, because I'm not a particularly partisan person. I like working with all kinds of people, even people who are kind of bogeymen for my party. Like on a personal level, I like working with everybody. And then I think the other thing that's made it feel less partisan is how closely divided the House is. And because it's basically split right down the middle.
Like one or two, right?
Right, in terms of its partisan makeup. And what I hear from people who have served longer is that when there has been a majority on either side, people tend, a really significant majority, people just tend to be bulldozers, kind of trying to push forward their agenda. And what I think is happening with that closely divided House is that people who are there for the right reasons, to try to get things done, don't want to waste their time.
Yeah.
So they tend to try to find common ground from the outset because they know otherwise they're not getting anything through. So, in some ways, well, I'd certainly love to be in the majority, and I'm going to work hard to try to get in the majority. In some ways, having a closely divided House is good for that camaraderie and collaboration.
And split government is always, that's that's the best. But what do you think of and the media always likes the fun, goofy stories like the secession guys. They want to have New Hampshire secede from the state. It's like you guys sit around and say, those guys are nuts.
Well, I know the sponsor of that bill. He sits like 2 seats away from me.
Okay, so you're not going to say
that. I enjoy chatting with him. I'm certainly not going to vote for his bill.
But how do most people think of that? How can they?
Well, it's surprising. There is a really strong. I don't even want to say libertarian because it's not libertarian.
Well, the Free Staters.
There is a very strong Free Stater presence.
Yeah.
And what's funny is that Free Staters travel with Democrats on a lot of issues, on a lot of our sort of personal liberty issues. Yeah. And a lot of times they're sort of the critical factor in advancing an agenda that I support. So
like
I have
what?
a lot.
Like libertarians, like cannabis,
right?
Choice, pro-choice, all that kind of stuff.
All those kinds of things, right? So a lot of respect for them and their positions, but then you see some things that come out like this, where I'm like, whoa, I don't know, it's just not even in my worldview.
I think it'd be okay. I think it'd be okay if Vermont left the union, but not New Hampshire. But anyway, David, we're out of time.
Yep.
Good to see you.
Yep.
Thank you,
chatting.
David.
Thank you.